Why is this occasion, in a sense, important for me? Because, as I said, I'm honoring Trayvon Martin's mother and the lawyers this coming Monday. But I think about Petra, and I think about how much she personally had to suffer over her lifetime, and how this dinner is, in a sense, a reflection of the great contributions she made. And I think about, have we forgotten about at all the whole idea of Trayvon Martin? Here's a kid who was 17, African American, and his father, Tracy Martin, had an idea on February 26, 2012. His idea was, I'm going to send my son to a place that he's safe. He's young, he's African American, he's in Florida, he can be in any place, but I'm going to send him to a safe place. He was sending him to a gated community where the father had a girlfriend and said, I want you to come to this gated community. And I think that's very important to understand what Trayvon Martin was going through on February 26, 2012. And why I keep talking about Trayvon and why it's become part of my litany of talking about justice in America is that when you think about it, people have forgotten about Trayvon Martin, that when he was killed by George Zimmerman in 2012, people don't even know that he was there being examined for his death, and he was at the coroner's office for 3 nights because no one identified him. His father was asking, my son has been killed, my son is missing, can you tell me where he is? And no one would say anything. Trayvon Martin did not have any identification on him. And so he was an unidentified black male, 72 hours in the morgue, and no one could identify as just another black death in the minds of those who were looking into it. And making it even more amazing, and you can have your views, and I'm not trying to change any views. And George Zimmerman, a white Hispanic male, was the community watch guard for what's going on in the suburban community. He's had a number of problems that you might know since the killing of Trayvon Martin in 2012. And it's very interesting, the things that he said that trigger race. And his whole point is that he had never met Trayvon Martin, ever. Didn't know who he was. But he made judgments about him because of his race. And you can hear him talking to the police, talking about, he looks like he's dealing drugs. He looks like he's a thug. All of these things about Trayvon Martin, who he never knew. And that became what George Zimmerman and so many people think about, so many people in this context. And it's important that we overcome that. I have been, in a sense, marrying Trayvon Martin with my colleague, my friend, Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. Many of you may remember in 2010, he was arrested in his own house. And he's not happy that I even talk about it. I did represent him, got him released because I knew the police officer, the head of the police unit in Cambridge. Got the charges dismissed because I knew the district attorney. And so he got all that service because he is someone who deserved it, but he also asked for it. He didn't know a lot to say to his secretary when he was handcuffed and taken out of his house and taken to the police station, but he was able to, with the cuffed hands, put down the window where he was sitting in the back seat. Those of you who have been in police cars, as lawyers, you know that there are no handles there, right? And so you can't jump out and run away, but he could let the window down with one of his fingers, and he said 2 words to his secretary. He said, call Tree, that's me, right? Think about that, having a lawyer on call whenever you have a problem. That's what he was able to do, right? And I'm not even talking tonight about the fact that he hasn't paid me at all for what I did. That's none of your business. That's confidential, right, Ike? So I'm not going to talk about the fact that he hasn't paid me at all for what I've done to represent him. Well. So the reality is that why are they connected? If you think about March 26, 2012, Henry Louis Gates Jr., you guys can serve the food too, don't wait for us. Eat your salad, whenever the food's ready, don't wait for us, don't wait for me. Feel free to serve. And I gotta give you some time too, right? It's coming. But the thing about it that makes it so significant when you think about it, Henry Louis Gates Jr. had all of the successes in life that you'd expect someone to have. He was from West Virginia. grew up in a segregated community. His mother talked to him about the issues of segregation. He learned a lot. He knew that he couldn't go to certain areas. He saw very few people like him where he was born in West Virginia. And yet he went on to Yale, and he got a PhD from Yale. He wrote many books. He's been on PBS frequently on many shows. He's an established, accomplished person. He's also a university professor. I don't mean he teaches at Harvard University, but he is a distinguished professor by having the title of university professor. So on February 26, 2012, his sense was, I have accomplished all that I can accomplish in life, right? I am the person. And he had this sense about how great he was. And I'm not condemning him, but my point in the book, and you'll see if you read this book, Presumption of Guilt, is that you can't escape race. And class doesn't allow you to escape race. And his point was that I have been established. I've done everything. I've got the degrees, I've got the honors, I've got the scholarships, I've got the books, I've got everything, and I should be treated differently. And his first words were remarkable. And as I say, they will tell you about the First Amendment, which is very important to the Petra Foundation. When he saw the police come into his door and asking for his identification, Gates said about 5 things. His first thing was, do you know who I am? Right, or like this, looking up, do you know who I am, right? And the second thing he said was, do you know who you're messing with? You can imagine Officer Crowley getting a little bit upset. He was a white police officer, born here in Cambridge, going to the same high school that my kids go to, Range High School. His father was a police officer, his brother was a police officer. He was an established guy. And he had worked at Brandeis, he'd worked at night at Harvard University as a police officer, and he and Gates had never seen each other. And so when Gates started saying, do you know who I am, do you know who you're messing with? And then Gates' third thing started getting him upset. When you talk about the clash of race and class, Gates' third thing is saying, are you doing this because I'm black and because you're a white police officer? You can imagine that Crowley's saying, has he lost his mind? He's beginning to get agitated, and the fourth thing he says, this is what happens to every black man in America, right? Skip all of a sudden became aware of and connected with the plight of black men in America. And what the last thing that he said was, I want your name and your badge number. And I tell all my students when they come the first day of class, never, ever, ever ask a police officer for his name or badge number, because they're right there on his or her suit. You can read them. It's very obvious that Professor Gates did not take my class. Right? I'm not holding that against him, but he just didn't take it. And that, you can see, was, in a sense, getting Crowley a little bit angry. And then the last thing Crowley said, it looks like we can't have a conversation here, so I'm going to go outside of the residence. That means probably nothing to most people. I hope it means something to lawyers. Crowley was smart enough to know as a police officer that I can't arrest this guy in his house, because all I can charge him with, which is not a fine, is contempt of cop. That is not a crime, right? And so Crowley starts going out of Gates' house, and Gates is not finished with him. Gates said, wait, and Gates tries to hobble out. He's disabled. Most of you know that he lost. He has wears a cane, uses a cane all the time, and he's hobbling out. Says, wait, I'm not through with you. And he goes out and he steps out on the porch in a sense to finish with Crowley. And Crowley then says, thanks for finally honoring my request. You are now under arrest. Because Gates was outside, he was disturbing the public, and Crowley had a basis to simply arrest him. And as you see the book, I write about all of this because it's important to give a fair assessment, and Crowley knew what he was doing. He was very much trying to make sure that people understood what was going on and make sure that he was following the book. But in writing this book, it's like Williams will tell you, I not only heard from Gates, but I look back at what did the police report say? What did the dispatcher say? All these documents have become important as a lawyer to figure out what's the story behind this. And what did we learn? A massive number of things. For example, one of the things that Crowley said when he called the police before he stepped out the house, he says, keep the wagons coming, right? Meaning that something's going to happen. I want you to keep the police wagons coming because I'm going to have somebody for you to arrest and take to the station. He made that clear. He also writes a report, and police officers, understandably, and I don't disagree, they have 24 hours from the time of the offense and the arrest to actually write the report. And his report was quite colorful because it revealed his thinking, but it also revealed that he was making a lot of false statements. Number one, he said that I talked to a woman and she told me that she saw two people with backpacks entering the house. And that's why I started the investigation. Now, two people with backpacks, that is a description of high school young people, because Gates' house is about 3 blocks from the high school, and a lot of the people there wear backpacks. And it justified, if the backpacks were in the house, I'm going to go and look for backpacks. There were no backpacks. What was at the house were actually 2 pieces of luggage that Gates had brought from his trip to China to see the 13th century documents involving Yo-Yo Ma. And he had a driver who brought him to the house. Couldn't open the door was jammed. They set down the 2 pieces of luggage, and then they keep trying to get the door open. They finally got the door open, and then they took the luggage into the house, the driver, and then the driver drove off. A woman had called and said, it looks like somebody's breaking into the 17 Ware Street, rather than saying that and she also said this, I'll get to it in just a minute, but I in my life as a lawyer, I have never, ever had a client who brings bags, luggage into a house. They take them out of the house, right? But you don't take them in the house, right? And that should have been a sign that this guy had something to do with it. And one thing that all of you have, many people were around in 2010 in July. You probably have some recollection of this event. But what's interesting is that when you think about it, the woman was asked by the dispatcher the right questions, right? Are they black or Hispanic, right? That's what the dispatcher said. And then she said, I can't hear you. She said, are they black, white, or Hispanic? And she said this, she said, one of them I think is Hispanic, but I don't know the race of anyone else. The other one is probably in the house. And I don't know, this is what she said, I don't know, this is all in the book and all transcribed by the 9/11 calls. I don't know if they worked there or if they actually live there. And so this witness was somebody who was not trying to presume someone's guilt, but she was presuming that they could be there, living there, working there, and I'm only telling you what I see, not what you may want to think. What Crowley wrote in his report was that she told him that these 2 African Americans with backpacks were going into the house as if they were attempting a burglary. That's what he wrote. And it's only being able to see that after the fact. What else makes it so significant? What people may not know, and read the book, it's very obvious, people don't know that on July 16, 2010, Professor Gates gave Crowley, when Crowley asked for identification, 2 forms of identification. 2, right? And he gave him both driver's license from Massachusetts that was valid and his Harvard ID. Now, it's not a hard question. Which ID do you think he gave him first? You're laughing, you know, right. He gave him the Harvard ID, right? And that's what, do you know who I am? Do you know who you're messing with, right? And his point was, I have arrived already, don't treat me differently. And in fact, he was treated differently because he was, in a sense, giving the officer a hard time, and that became a big part. So he looked at the Harvard ID and he looked at the driver's license. And Gates became very impatient after he said all these things. Look at the officer looking at them and holding him. He never denied that he looked at them. And he said in his report after the 24 hours later that the gentleman describes himself as Henry Louis Gates Jr. He didn't describe himself, his ID said that. His driver's license said that. But his report made it sound like Gates was giving a name to cover up. And so that's what happened in terms of that case. And the reason it's important, it relates in some way to Trayvon Martin, it can happen to anybody. And if you look at the book, I have a whole section in there at the end of the book about hundreds of people who are Trayvon Martins. They may be doctors, they may be lawyers, they may be teachers, They may be working at some important job. They may have PhDs. They may have multiple degrees. And they're treated just as if they are the color of their skin, not the content of their character, someone who's accomplished a lot. And they just flooding, women and men, black and white, start sending me letters saying, I too had an incident like Gates. And what made the thing most amazing, the most number of responses I received from people around the world were from African American men around the country. And it was shocking to me because they had never ever before that day in July had told anybody, had taken any action or said anything about being in the same situation. So as I talk about Trayvon Martin, the reality is it can happen to anybody at any place at any time. And it's not just African American women, it's women and men of every race, and it makes a huge difference. Let me just say this as I move forward. I think about Harvard Law School. If anybody's ever seen me there, I'm always with a suit and with a tie. Why? It's not necessary. And I'm not going to mention Duncan Kennedy by name, but one of my colleagues always has holy pants and tie-dyed shirts, right? Right, and so, and there's never a fear of being misidentified as something other than a Harvard Law School professor. And I have to make sure when I'm there day or night, weekday or weekend, to be identified as a Harvard Law professor or any other professor, because you have to wear this uniform because it makes an enormous amount of difference. So what are our lessons from this? And what do we learn from all of it? It's very significant. The lessons are this, that first, and I say this in the book, that we need more people who have these experiences to be involved in law enforcement. Now, what am I saying? I'm not saying just be a negative factor in law enforcement. You should be there because you know what it means and what it experiences. And I say here, and it's up to you to think about it, what would happen if Gates had been white? What would happen if Crowley had been a woman? What would happen if Crowley had been black? What would have happened if Gates had been a woman? You can imagine the scenarios might be different. I don't answer the question, I just raise the question because I think that's important in terms of what people have to do. As I think about it, it is very important to think about as well what we have to do as an organization to move things in the right direction. I think as well about a person that that I mentored, President Obama, and a person who I actually taught, his wife, Michelle Obama. They didn't meet at Harvard Law School. And it's very clear that she is one of the smartest people in the nation, no question about that. And I'm not going to say publicly that she's smarter than President Barack Obama. I'm not going to say that Michelle Obama is smarter than Barack Obama. And you didn't hear that from me. But just look at what she was able to do and how effective she was. And that's part of the idea of having lawyers who can make an enormous amount of difference. And I use him as an example because I have problems with NSA, I have problems with the healthcare system, I have a lot of issues with him now, and he knows that, there's no question about that. And I still advise him. We have discussions about a whole host of issues, and including judicial appointments or the lack of judicial appointments. And I think that that's important. And I think back about him as a student and what it was like at Harvard Law School when he was here in the 80s. Michelle Obama graduated in June 1988, and he didn't arrive until September 1988, so they never met at Harvard. They met during the first year of his work after Harvard Law School. In the summer of the first year, he went to Chicago, and Michelle's manager at the law firm urged her to take him out to lunch to talk about the firm. And she was very intent on persuading him to come to the law firm. And he was listening. And he says, I appreciate what you have to say, but I just wonder if we can have a date. Now, he should have been sued back in 1991. He wasn't. You can't do that. I don't care if you're the interviewee, not the interviewer. You can't do that, but he did that, right? And they had a great relationship. They got married. They got married by Jeremiah Wright. They had their daughters were baptized by Jeremiah Wright, christened in the church by Jeremiah Wright. You know, as he left Harvard, we had a conversation. He was trying to figure out what should he do. And he calls me Tree, he said, Tree, I'm just trying to figure out what I should do in leaving Harvard Law School. I promised the people in Chicago, I would come back and continue my work as a community organizer, because that's an important part of my life, and that's kind of what I want to do. I want to do something in public interest. But as the first black president of Harvard Law Review, I have earned the right to clerk for the Supreme Court. And with my academic performance, I'm one of the top students in my class, not just top students here, but in my class. And I could easily, this is 1991, earn a salary of $100,000 in Boston or Washington or New York or Chicago. I can earn that salary. But I promise my young people that, promise the people in Chicago that if I got my education at Harvard Law School, became a lawyer, I would come back to Chicago. Can I give up all these things that I have earned and go back to Chicago and work for the community? What do you think? And I said, Barack, yes, you can. Right? There's a point here. There's a point here. All your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and nieces and nephews, they think that Barack Obama came up with Yes We Can. I didn't come up with it, but I heard it long before Barack Obama. I heard it as a kid in high school, working in the fields with somebody by the name of Cesar Chavez and his partner, Dolores Huerta. And they were talking to Mexican workers in fields in California who had no rights, who were affected by pesticides, who were underpaid for the work that they did, and were given every kind of discriminatory approach by the people who own the fields, and they couldn't even speak English, but they learned 3 words that made them enthusiastic. And the words they learned that keep them going were "Sí se puede," "Sí se puede," which is yes, we can, right? And that was the language that I heard as a kid growing up in the 1960s in high school. And so it tells you that you can have a movement that may have started long before you even were aware of it, and how big an impact it had on people who were coming behind you. And I think about that and think about the importance of us connecting to the past. And the final thing is this. One of my great heroes who I never had the chance to meet was Martin Luther King Jr. We just celebrated in Washington and nationwide and worldwide the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington from 1963. What was amazing about that is that people don't realize, if you really study King, then you understand the complexity of his life. And it tears me up every January 15th, his birth date, or every April 4th, his death date, when they have children in our schools repeat, "I have a dream." Because that's not what he was really talking about. That's the end of his dream. His dream was what he hoped the world would provide, not what it was providing in 1963. But he realized, and if you look back at the speech, please read all the speech. He had the crowd worked up. It was a multiracial crowd. People were angry because he was talking about the fact that America wasn't treating all of its people the way that it should. And as he worked them up, talking about the issues of police harassment, talking about the lack of jobs, talking about all the forms of discrimination, he was talking about these things. And just as he reached that soaring point, he told the folks, you can see that folks was ready to say, "Let's go. He's got us go. Let's go. Let's go take Washington down." But he didn't want to take Washington down because he had already had a significant impact on a number of presidents, not by being in the White House, but by influencing what's done in the White House. If there was no Martin Luther King Jr. talking to President Lyndon Baines Johnson and John Kennedy before he was assassinated, there would be no Thurgood Marshall in 1967. There would be no Voting Rights Act in 1965. There would be no Civil Rights Act of 1964. Think of all the things that happened, and I'm not putting aside the fact that he was responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths in Vietnam. And his legacy is going to be a long time before we decide what to say about President Lyndon Baines Johnson. But the reality is that there is something that we have to teach our children about 50 years ago. And they keep thinking that King, who's King? I don't know. Didn't he have a dream? Is that the guy? They have no idea how many times he faced death threats. They don't have no idea that he was stabbed once in New York. They have no idea that he was, in a sense, told by the FBI that he should commit suicide. They have no idea that he was always going out wherever people ask us to go and to make a big difference. And that's a person that we need to respect. And another person who brought on people like Constance Baker Motley and other great leaders was Thurgood Marshall. And I love that man. I did get a chance to meet him before he passed away. And he was, again, a legendary leader, somebody who makes a big difference. What did he say? What did he do? He was a great lawyer doing things in the 50s before people, in the 30s, before people knew how great he was. One of his first cases in the 1930s was with Charles Hamilton Houston, whose name over my institute at Harvard, the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice. Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall sued the University of Maryland Law School. Why? Because they had never in the 1930s accepted a black student, even though they were qualified black students. And what was amazing is Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston won the lawsuit against the University of Maryland and allowed the first admission of an African American student at the University of Maryland Law School. Think about that you have learned the skills at Howard University Law School that taught you how to be a great lawyer to, in a sense, change the legal system. It won't change your job or change your perspective, but it really changed the way that the people around the country looked at the issue of race. And I have no idea what Thurgood Marshall said in Baltimore when he won this case in Maryland in 1937, but he said something like, "How you like me now," right? He was making a point that he was a Howard-trained lawyer, and that made all the difference. Every time I talk anywhere, I give credit to people like Thurgood Marshall and Martin Luther King, because they open up doors for me. It doesn't matter what I was qualified to do. That's irrelevant. The reality is that we couldn't go to places, couldn't be a part of it, couldn't make an impact if they had not done it. There were people at Harvard before I came, at Stanford before I came, like me, but the reality is that they opened up doors that are still open. And I think we have to, in a sense, respect that and admire that. And as we think about Trayvon Martin in conclusion, is that we have to make sure that every young person we see, like this young brother right here, we have to, in a sense, give them a sense to know that they too can be whatever they want to be. Women and men, boys and girls. We have to tell them when they say, "Can I be president of the United States?" Yes, you can, Sarah. It's going to happen. You have to tell them, "Can I be a bus driver?" Yes, you can. Can I be a brain surgeon? Yes, they can do all those things. But we need to make sure that we are the inspiration that they have to make that happen. That is our mission and our goal. And if we do that, the words that will be important for us for the 21st century is to talk to a young person who we see on the streets, in the neighborhood, down the street, at a grocery store, in a park, coming from a school, who are wondering what their life will look like 30 years from now, 40 years from now, and they have these big dreams. We have to tell them, yes, you can. That has to be our motto. As we go forward, it's important that we make clear to the next generation of people who are around us, who are about us, who believe in us, who praise us, that they too can do what we've done, and there's no stopping them right now. Yes, they can. Thank you.